Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Renee Hyatt. Welcome to Tutorial Tuesday Week 9. Today we're going to be wrapping up our bloom project. We're going to talk through how to cut down our quilt center for an on-point quilt, as well as applying borders, what you should do when you have a piece border versus what you should do when you're putting on a regular border, how to stay organized while constructing that border, just a few tips on maybe how you want to think about setting, as well as staying organized while applying it to make sure those borders go on in the direction you intended them to, and then how to keep it together until you get it to the quilter or you quilt it yourself. So let me walk you through how I got to this finished state. Once you have your center completed, before cutting, you want to make sure that you are giving it a very good press. Once I have it flat and a little stiff, I am then going to trim down my center to 1/4 inch from the points of my block. And I'm going to do that along the long run as well, but I always start with my corner. So I take the largest square that I have, and I'm going to look to make sure that the 1/4 inch is lining up with my point on the top of the corner block, as well as the 1/4 inch is lining up with the corner of this block. So it's the same block, but I'm making sure that my ruler is 1/4 inch off of where this block ends as well as this block ends. So I'm just going to give it a double check over here. I like to use my Quilter Select. You could certainly use a ruler, a different ruler. I like it because it grips the fabric. And I'm going to need to do, a pretty decent cut. Now I won't come all the way down to the bottom of my ruler because I am going to go ahead and take a long ruler and go point to point here. But I will come about 2-3 inches down from there. And I know this is scary, so just take your time. This is not something to be rushed. All right. So I have that cut, and I typically just give it a rough cut here, just so I know where I stopped cutting. And then I'm going to swish my tush around to the corner of the table. And I'm left-handed, but I'm doing this right-handed since the majority of you are left-handed. But if you're left-handed, you're just taking the other corner of the table. Find yourself a nice left-handed table. And then the same thing, I'm going to go 3 inches past. And then I'm just going to give that a little cut, just so I know exactly what I've cut. And then I'm certain that this is 1/4 inch off of this point of this block and 1/4 inch off of this point off this block. So now I'm going to go ahead and move it up and start cutting this. For that, I usually grab a long ruler. All right, so I'm just going to move this up a bit. And don't be afraid to weigh down your quilt a bit, with another ruler that grips it. You want to make sure you're nice and flat when you do your move. So again, I'm taking time to line up that point, and I'm going to come down here and line up this point. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that it was all still on the camera. All right, so now I'm going to cut my 1/4 inch. Again, I'm starting about 1 inch below that point that I've matched. I'm going nice and slowly up. And once again, I'll give this a little cut, and I know where I'm at. So I'm going to move it up again. So I don't really try and go long distances. My goal is really just to go from one point to the next point. I want to be able to clearly see, so it's not a race. It's more important to have it right, because guess what? When you cut this 1/4 inch off, it's not too easy to put it back on. All right, so this one lines up here, and then this one I'm eyeballing between. All right, and then I'm going to cut again. I got it about 1 inch below, and give it a cut. All right, and I'm going to move it up. All right, and now you can see, I promise you I won't bore you with all 4 sides, but I want you to see how this really works. So, again, I'm at the corner. I don't know if it's in the camera. Almost. You can kind of see that I'm at my corner here. So, basically, my goal is to cut from here to here, and then I'm going to use my corner to do the full corner. Okay? So let me just scooch this back within range of my short arms. All right, so now I'm going to line that one up, this one up. So I'm at my quarter, and since I know I'm at the corner here, I'm just going to go right at that intersection and cut, because I want to do the rest with the corner ruler. All right, so not many of us cut straight or are ambidextrous and could cut this way. So I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to turn my quilt, right? Because I know I'm on a right-handed corner and I can swish my tush over to the other side. So I'm going to take my square ruler, and now I'm going to take the time to line that up on the quarter, and then I'm bringing this over to the corner, the quarter. So quarter, I know that by looking at, excuse my head if it's in the shot, is lined up, and then to get this one lined up. And again, I'm only going to go a few inches down, because the rest I'll get with my straight ruler. All right. And then I'm just going to repeat the exact steps that I took earlier until I have all 4 sides done. Okay. So after you have trimmed down your center so that it's only 1/4 inch greater than your corners of your blocks, is when I will tell you, normally you would measure in 3 places in each direction. Measure on your side, your center, and your other side. Determine that those 3 lengths, add them up, divide them by 3, and that's the size that you would cut your borders. However, our last border is a pieced border. Therefore, we must get this center to be the length of the inner borders that I published. So in this case, for the throw, it's 51.5 and 54.5. However, I still need to know what I'm working with. So I still need to measure the center of my quilt to determine, is my quilt bigger than that 51.5, because those are the first 2 sides to go on, or is it larger than the 51.5, so smaller or larger? Which one is bigger? Because that's going to dictate which one I'm going to put on top when I go and sew. So I'm going to, and I know you won't be able to see all of this. I like to use my Dritz 120 inch tape. I don't leave home without this. I have like 6 of them. I do have a couple on my website if you're interested in purchasing them. They work great. I do use just a rubber band to keep it together. And you can see here that I've unwound everything below 60 because my lengths should be in the 50s. If my quilt center ends up being 60, I'm in dire trouble. So anyhow, and I just keep the rest rubber band. It goes to 120 inches, which is great when working on your long arm or on a queen size or king size quilt. So these are just fabulous, inexpensive, great to use. All right, so I'm going to start at my one side, and I'll be a little off camera for this, but basically I'm going to go ahead and work my way down the edge, and you can see a little bit about that through that. Now I'm working around camera poles and lamps, but you'll get the idea. So I come out at 51 and an extra eighth. So I'm at 51 and 5/8 is the center of my quilt for this side. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat this with the other side that's opposite, because I'm going to put those first two sides on first. And then once I have those two sides on, then I'm going to measure in the opposite direction to put on my top and bottom borders. So when I sew, I'm going to sew with my quilt top on the bottom since it is bigger, and I'm going to let my presser foot help me bring that in a bit. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so I measured the other side and I came up with similar results. That one's just about a 1/16 inch larger. So what I did is I took my cut border and I folded it in half and gave it a press. And that way I know what is my halfway point. So I'm going to go ahead and what I've done here with my ruler is I've gone ahead and lined it up with two crucial points, because this is my midpoint of my quilt. So I don't have a block currently telling me where the middle is. So I'm just using my ruler to come out so that I can line up my halfway point. And remember, my quilt top is larger by 1/8 of an inch, so that's what I'm going to put on the bottom. So here, and I could just move that ruler out now that I know my midpoint. So I'm going to pin it at my midpoint, and then let me move this out of the way. I'm going to scooch this down a bit so you can see, hopefully. Sorry, working around camera poles and everything. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and pin the end. And I think you can see that. Yep. All right, and then basically I'm working that 1/16 of an inch in, and that's not hard at all. If you were to wind up a little larger than that, I mean, you could probably work in a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch for sure. You know, when you get into the inch problem, then you really got to examine your 1/4 inch, because that's just that's getting a little too much. All right. So normally, again, I would have cut my inner border to match the average of my 3 measurements in that direction. However, for this one, I need to get it to this measurement in order for my piece border to work. All right, but irrelevant, even if you were doing this for another quilt, you would still, more than likely, when you take into account the sorry, I'm just going to go to the end here. You can't see it. I'm a little off camera. And put my pin in the other side, matching that up to the top. And again, working in my 1/8 of an inch on this side, or 1/16 of an inch when I split it. But basically, you would have probably been off a fraction as well when you're putting this on. So this is the same exact process you would take when you are putting on your borders, even for a quilt that you have measured and are cutting the borders properly. People ask, and someone did submit a question this week about her borders are always wavy. So that's two reasons. It could be how you've cut them, but more than likely it's usually that you're putting a border on that is way too big or way too small for your quilt top. All right, so I've pinned, you can see I've pinned about every 4 inches or so, definitely at the crucial points that are pieced beneath, because I'm going to be sewing with my inner border on top. So I'm going to make sure that when I'm stitching, I'm not flipping stitches. Before I head over to the sewing machine, I did want to show you one last thing. So you can see here what I did is, once I have my border pinned, I did roll it up so that everything is nice and condensed, and then I roll it up this way, and I'm going to set this on my lap when I sew, unfurling it as I go. And this helps support the quilt so that it doesn't get stretched, doesn't get caught on anything. You know, we've taken all these hours to put it together this far. You don't want to step on it, get it caught on something and such. So I don't want to bore you with the sewing, but I did want to show you that. All right. And if you have an even larger quilt, you might want to put a table to the side if you don't have, you know, some folks have drawers that they can pull out on their sewing tables and put a little tabletop on to help support it. I usually try and roll it as much as possible and put it in my lap. But if it does get bigger, I have a side table that I put beside me. All right, let me go sew.
Okay, so we want to go ahead and set up our piano keys border. To do so, I laid out a plan. Then I went and repeated that and set up all 4 rows. I began pressing them, following the pressing instructions in the booklet. After I had them all together, I took my 1 and 3 and sewed on my cornerstone. Since these were the 2 that I assigned to the top and the bottom, I made sure to notate this in my cheat sheet. While I had the orientation and the order fresh of mind, I went ahead and stay stitched the outer edge of my strips. I do this by moving my needle over to a shy 1/4 inch and going down the outer edge. This will keep the exposed edge intact while I sew them onto the quilt. I do this for all 4 sides.
So this does 2 reasons. One, I go ahead and put the stay stitch in to keep the pieces together. So from, since it's a pieced border, so from unraveling. But also, I know that the stay stitch side that I took so much time with my notes to figure out was the outside edge, I know that this is the edge that's going to get sewn into the center of my quilt. So I'm going to put my sides on first. So you can see here I have my label number 2. I know the number 2 is my right hand border. So I've rolled up my quilt so that my right hand side is exposed. All right. So now I can go ahead and put these pins back. All right, that's my right hand side. And again, you don't need to buy the expensive pins that are already pre-numbered. Flower pins with a Sharpie works great. All right, additionally, I have once again found the midpoint of my border, right? So whether or not it's a piece border or a regular border. And I'm going to go ahead and put this at my midpoint. So I can see that still pretty good from the previous fold, even though I've given this a really nice press. So, but I'm still going to start here. That's my midpoint. If not, you can go ahead and do the ruler technique again. All right, so I'm going to pin that. That's my midpoint. And then I'm going to scooch it down. And this becomes my edge. All right, so no nesting of seams. Am I on the camera? Let me move it over a little bit. All right. And so I'm going to pin. And then, not to bore you, but I'm going to go ahead through and make sure that this is pinned nicely along, making sure that I don't flip my seams. Since I went ahead and did a lengthwise cut for my inner border, I don't have any seams there to flip, so I'm just going to be careful here when I'm stitching. And again, you can see I already have it prepared. It's rolled up, and I will roll it up again to be able to sit on my lap. And so I'm going to put my two sides borders on next. So I went ahead and sewed on that right side that we pinned, and then the left side, pressing. And now now I've put on the top border, which you can see here will nest at the interchange of the piece border and my square unit. So remember, I put the square units on the ends of the top and bottom, and then I have my stay stitch here that let me know that this is the outside edge, plus my notes tell me that my top starts with the light blue. So I'm good to go with my capital A floating above my head. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this side on, and then just one more. So that's our bloom journey. I hope you learned a lot, especially how to go about using your tape, right? It's critical when putting on borders. You have to have a good measuring tape and a large flat surface. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a cutting table that's as large as mine, but it definitely needs to be, you know, maybe your dining room table, your kitchen table. Dare I say that? I know some people probably are cringing, but you just need a large surface. If you can, get down on the ground. Whatever it takes to make sure you measure it. Give it a good flat press, then measure. Critical when adding borders. It's my biggest tip for you. So I hope you've been completing your worksheet as well. It makes it so happy to check those boxes. It's critical for also keeping notes while you go. It can fit nice and neatly into your pattern booklet. So if you see, I'm absolutely thrilled with my finished product here, and you can see the difference from my original, which I still adore, but the pink, which would which is here, because it's such a floral print, it was too big of a scale to go here, versus now the finished product. You can see what a difference fabric selection makes. We're all human, we all are stubborn in our heads, but sometimes we just gotta listen to that gut. So I'm hoping, even though we're wrapping up our Tutorial Tuesday Bloom series, I'm hoping you'll tune in for week 10. We're going to talk about backings. So I'm going to put it up on my Facebook group, so my sewing circle, as well as on the blog. But I'm hoping that you will submit your questions by this coming Sunday on backings. So they're another critical part of getting your quilt to be straight and to lay flat. So tune in next week. And thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you love this class, please consider taking one of my online quilting classes. They're up on my website, sewonthego.net. I'll be releasing some, at least one per month, over the next couple of months while we're still unable to get together in larger groups. So I hope you join me.